Good morning, Grace.
Good morning. Hi everybody.
Yeah, welcome to all our listeners in today's episode of Can You See What I See? Vicky Scott here, and today my co-host Grace Hart and I, we want to talk about our addictions to judgment. But first, let me just thank you all for your feedback to our last episode on awareness. And some of you commented that you now have a name for what you knew all along. And that makes my heart sing, as I have a vision that Can You See What I See will increase the vocabulary we have around all these innate wisdoms that we all have. And unfortunately, they've just been depressed by our life experiences and probably as a result of trauma that's been passed down through generations. Grace, back to our addiction to judgment. In a previous episode, I heard you say, I think, that judgment is the biggest disease on the planet.
Yeah, the number one disease on the planet, the biggest killer. Yep, that's my point of view.
Is that right? Well, we're going to hear some more of what you can see around that.
I was giggling because, we go, hi, and it's just this lovely energy, and we're going to talk about addiction to judgment. It's like this, It's like...
But, you can make it fun too, because if you get too serious about these things, it becomes a real problem, whereas that's not our intention. We're just sharing our stories and how we're not experts.
We are not experts. No, I know nothing.
But we have experienced all this, and we have found ways that how we can change our own world by having a different look at it, being willing to maybe reframe something the way in which we've looked at it. So let's start, eh?
Well, before it's something you just said, and it's probably going to be a whole different podcast, but when you talked about making it significant, when we put too much meaning onto addiction and judgment, and you can actually have fun and laughter can heal things as quote unquote significant as addiction to judgment or addictions even. Okay, let's start. Let's go.
Well, I actually wanted to look at where the word addiction came from. And I understand it's derived from a Latin term for enslaved by or bound to. And I guess, if you've ever struggled to overcome an addiction or tried to help anyone else to overcome one, then you'll understand why that rings true, because you really are enslaved by it. And as you know, I love Dr. Gabor Mate because a number of reasons. I mean, he has been a family physician for decades and stuff, but he's worked in this area of the impact of trauma on people. And he said when he went through uni, there wasn't one lecture that was around emotional pain. And then there was another doctor who graduated in 2005, and she said there was nothing in her degree around emotional pain either. And it really caused me to think, no wonder, even in my own mother's case, when she went looking for help, she was just diagnosed with antidepressants. So that's why another reason that I think it is time we started to talk about these things in real life. And Dr. Gabor, he describes an addiction as any behaviour that makes you feel temporary relief or pleasure, but you crave it and you can't give it up. But it has negative impacts long term. And he says it can include not just drugs and gambling, which we often can think about, or alcohol, but there's also an addiction to sex or the internet or Facebook or relationships, shopping, eating, work, television, just to name a few. So he reckons his addiction is shopping. And a lot of people say, oh, isn't that nice? You love music. He actually collects classical music. But he said it's caused negative impacts on his relationship with his wife, as he used to lie when he was going out to buy more CDs, one day after the other. I know it's hard, but we can use that excuse. Yeah. We work hard, but it relaxes me. We excuse the addiction, don't we? What do you think? Have you ever had
like that? I have. I mean, for me, there's these addictions that are respectable, if you know what I mean. So, people go to the gym. That's really good, isn't it? It's not an addiction. Gym too much. Or for me, I had no idea, but I had a really good friend that every time we caught up, it was always positive, generative. And so I assumed, because I was, making time, sometimes up to 3 times a week to meet up with this person, it was always going to be generative and creative, and it always felt that way. And it wasn't until I really looked at it that it fell into that category. I was using that time with her to distract from what I was aware of, what I needed to actually be present with, to choose, to create. And, I was going through DV at the time, and so it was just my escape into a happy reality. And I really didn't think it was an addictive friendship, but that's what it was. It wasn't truly generating and creating my life. It was putting me in a holding pattern of feeling good, always felt good in her company, but it didn't actually generate and create or get me to be present with my life. And I think that, when he talks about you can't give it up, it doesn't have to look like cocaine addiction, can't give it up. It can look like, I really enjoy catching up with that person, and you just end up making choices that you don't realize, are actually stopping you becoming aware in your life and getting present with what needs to change, or, what you can choose.
Mm. Yeah, well, that was the kicker for me when he said that the addiction is not the problem.
That's
so we
right.
can focus on it being a problem, but he says the addiction is our attempt to solve the real problem, which is a trauma which has never been healed.
That's right. You don't want to look at it, or you don't even know it's there, and...
Yeah, you may not even know it's there, because many of us think that we haven't really had, that traumatic an event in our life that could be classified as a trauma. But in fact, it's not the traumatic event that is the trauma. It's what happened inside our body when that event happened,
Exactly.
and what we made it mean.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put a little link to one of his YouTubes where people can hear that for themselves, because I think there's absolute gold in that.
Oh, it's a brilliant YouTube video.
Yeah. So what do you think the real problem, Grace?
For me, trauma is a huge thing, and I'm so grateful that we're becoming more and more trauma informed as a society. But it's more about, like, for example, addictions. When I first, heard about addictions, my first thought was, well, oh, that's not related to me, because I've never done drugs in my life, and so I don't have an addiction problem. But yet, as I said, I was addicted to seeing a friend. I was addicted to watching Netflix. Anything to sort of make me escape from the relationship I was in that I didn't want to, deal with. And so, I just really wish everybody to get that we all have a mental illness. We are all suffering with trauma in some capacity. And what we tend to do, which is really, really sad, is that we minimize what we're doing. And, I had a client the other day, and she said, oh, I just assumed all relationships will work like this. I didn't realize this is abuse. I thought this is normal. And, we've become almost, like that hot water getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and we're not realizing it. And I just wish for us to have a really big look at this, that maybe some kindness, caring is required. And because what I know for me personally, and also with my clients, is that until you feel safe, secure and supported, the trauma's not going to leave. And, if it doesn't leave your body, you're going to be, addicted to whatever you're addicted to keep depressing that awareness of, and the last thing I really do want to say is what I've noticed with people who have addictions is that they are incredibly aware. They are incredibly sensitive. You could say they're empathic, or, psychic, or whatever you want to, however you want to say it. But they've got absolutely incredible abilities, and so they don't want to know how much they know, and so they do this addiction just to depress what they know. So that's really all I wanted to say for now.
Wow, that is really powerful, because I think as a race, as a species, we over the last probably probably forever, but we have depressed our own innate wisdom, haven't we? It's like trying to stay safe, keep our head below the parapet. As soon as you put it up, you're going to get it knocked off. And so it's better to play safe. And if you're different from what the dominant part of our society appears to be like, then there's something wrong with you. And so you do tend to depress all those emotions and beliefs and I just wonder about how many of us are, we've only got to look at the rates of antidepressants that are being prescribed worldwide and think, well, something's not working here. Why are we trying to depress life itself? So anyway, that's a different story. But, the other one I looked at too when we were talking about our addiction to judgment, I thought, but why do we judge? I know. But, when I looked more into it, I read that, our brains are actually wired to make automatic judgments.
There's an addiction there. Yeah, addicted to your thinking, addicted to that thought pattern, addicted to that we need judgment rather than awareness to change something.
Now that judgment rather than awareness.
Yeah, that's what I see is the issue. We go straight to judgment, thinking that that's the quote unquote right thing to do, so we can change something. But the minute you choose judgment, all possibilities disappear because a judgment is a finite point of view. And I've said to people lots of times, if I stand up, if I draw a number 6 in the sand in front of me, and I get someone to stand in, on the other side of that, they see a 9 and I see a 6, and both are correct. So, why don't we step away from the need of judgment, the addiction to judgment, and actually have come into the space that's around and go, oh, from the space I can see there's a 6, I can see there's a 9. And also knowing that you can say, well, you know what? Let's not even focus on the 6 or the 9. We acknowledge that there's an impasse here between two people. They both think they're correct. But let's go into this space of possibilities where what can we choose? What can we create, around this and with this? And, that's what for me, I'm really passionate. Don't get me started. I'm really passionate about how we are addicted to our thoughts, like Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about this. We are literally addicted to our thinking, and our thinking creates hormones, chemicals. And so it's, to me, what I worked out is that someone injecting heroin and then someone like me having thoughts that produce cortisol. So I'm just naturally injecting cortisol into my body, which is incredibly harmful when I was going through the DV stuff. And it's no different, whether it's a natural flush of, from our body's pharmacy that we give us through our addictive thinking versus, someone choosing a needle and doing it. In my mind now, I get it's exactly the same thing. It's just that one's more respectable, to have depressive thoughts and injecting yourself with depressive things. It has it's received differently in society than someone doing the exact same thing but taking an external thing. Yeah.
And we'll often excuse that thinking by saying, "Well, it's true. I'm just telling it as it is."
It's a 6. It's a 9. I'm telling the truth.
It's a
why can't you see what I see?
Funny that. But also, I do acknowledge that there is a time and a place for that, because that judgment is a survival mechanism as well, to help us decide whether we feel safe or not. But that's not really what we're talking about.
But I'm going to question that, because do you actually need judgment for that, or can you just be aware? When you're walking down when you're walking down the street and someone comes up behind you and puts a knife to your throat, do you need to judge to be able to work out what to do? What happens is you get completely aware in that moment and you do whatever, and so this is where I'd like to really explore this, because I actually do not believe you need judgment. You can make a choice, but you don't need judgment.
I agree. And perhaps it's just the word that's used, that it's taken on a negative thing as well.
Yeah,
but I agree with you. Awareness sounds much more empowering. And
how...
I'm going with that one.
Well, how Gabor talks about you can't punish the pain out. And with judgment, it has a punishment element to it instead of a possibility element to it. You know, so it's like, okay, Vicky, I'm going to judge whether you're a good friend of mine. You know, like, let me judge that. Let me look at this. Or I can actually just perceive the space that gets created between the two of us. And every time I'm with you, there is just kindness and generation and like this generativeness. And you're willing to, you know, speak what's true for you. You know, even if it's something I don't want to hear, that's, you know, you're willing to do that from not a judgment, from a space. Like, hey, have you looked at this? What about that? It doesn't have the smell of judgment. Instead of, you know, Grace, you know, the problem with you is, you know, or I've judged that you know, it's a very different thing.
Yes, and has a very different energy around it. I so agree. So, yes, I think that needs to go to that library that many of us don't access very often. Yeah, it would certainly change our world, wouldn't it, eh? But, you know, I was also reading that in most cases we judge others in order to feel better about ourselves because we're lacking self-acceptance and self-love. So,
yep, judgment creates separation.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, judgment creates separation. You only judge to either put yourself in a superior point of view, you know, like COVID narcissists, for example, passive-aggressive COVID narcissists, that's one of their skills. You know, they choose judgment and they do it very, very sneakily as a bastardized caring, you know. So, but it's really come from the judgment of they've judged that you're this way and then they're superior in what they think that you should do and they deliver that, you know. So, yes, you know, judgment is one of the most unkind things you can do to yourself. And what I've also noticed is that when you choose judgment, you're actually choosing to not be aware. So every time you choose judgment, what you're saying to yourself is, I don't want to know what's possible. You know, so my husband's this, my wife's that teacher's that, you know, that teacher's that bad teacher because of, or, you know, my kids are this or my kids are that. If you're doing that, you're not choosing possibilities. You're not choosing to see the absolute space of being, that beautiful being that the child, the teacher, the ex or whatever is. And so much more is possible when you choose awareness rather than judgment.
And by constantly seeing the bad in others, we're actually training our minds to find the bad.
Yeah, we're addicted to it.
Neural pathways. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're addicted.
But what we don't understand is that that's actually killing us because it's increasing stress in us, and we know that it weakens the immune system.
Yeah, anything that doesn't fit our perspective or our point of reference, if we don't have an open mind, you know, willing to see the space rather than the 6 or the 9, you know, then we're killing the planet too. You know, and so let's expand out. Yeah, let's expand out. And what I'd love you, actually, you know, this could be a home play. But what I was just about to say is, wouldn't it be great if this week, instead of going to your normal judgment of, oh, that person's, you know, this or that person's that, what if you stopped, you just said stop? You know, I saw a YouTube of a lady going, just say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so maybe you can do that. Just stop that thinking, stop that addictive thinking that I need to judge this or judge that person. And then just be a space of what could be going on that they could be choosing this. You know, like Oprah talks about what happened to them. And it's not to make whatever they're doing, if they're doing something inappropriate or being something inappropriate, you know, okay. It just stops that judgment of they are this, and let's go into what's possible. And in there, what's possible, you might get they're never going to stop drinking, or I need to leave them, or whatever. But it's at least it's coming from a possibility and from an awareness rather than I've judged you to be this, and therefore, you know, I'm separating energetically from you or separating physically from you, and then that's it. You know, you cut yourself off and everyone else.
I think that judgment happens when people make you question your character or your beliefs or your decisions, whatever, in a way that causes shame, which, as we've talked about before, is but it can make you feel judged in a negative way. And even though they don't necessarily intend it, that feeling of judgment is still hurtful to another human being, isn't it?
Well, judgment is unkind. Judgment is abuse. I don't actually believe that there is kind judgment. I think that's bastardized. I don't think it's real. And so
I like that.
yeah, and so I think that you know, it's, gosh, there's so much I want to say about this topic. If you're triggered because someone's, you know, judged you, or you know, you've that's okay. Of course, you know, you need to be aware of your triggers, and you need to be aware of, you know, we talk about it from a trauma transformer point of view, that, you know, I give the example of the flower, and when you're in the center of the flower, that's you being you. And so judgment solicits you to go into a polarity of right and wrong. So when you hear the judgment, you know, one of your petals, your dissociated part or disenfranchised part, you know, gets uproared and maybe hijacks you, or just, you know, has a moment, and then you've lost your awareness, you've lost your capacity to your being. And that's what abusers do. Abusers judge, or they covertly judge, and that's that bastardized kindness. And, you know, they do that so you get off from, you know, you detach from your beingness, and they've got you. Judgment's to control, basically. Judgment is about power and control because it's a superior point of view. And so, yeah, I've got so much to say about this because it's just so, it's so mean. It's such a mean thing for you to judge yourself, your body. You know, when I think about the things I used to think about my body, you know, I really apologize to it. And, you know, I'd never say those things to my friend's body, you know, but yet you say it to yourself. Yeah. And same thing, you know, if you, it's interesting. It's interesting. But I just would love you guys to just be open this week. Instead of choosing a judgment, why don't you stop 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and choose what's possible here? You know, what am I aware of here that I'm not acknowledging? And, you know, rather than being hooked into the right, the wrong, the good, the bad, the polarity, the judgment. And that's the addictive, compulsive thinking that we do as a society. You know, when something's wrong, we just go into judgment of it.
Well, you know, I often think this something, what we're currently doing isn't working. We've never had so much wealth available to our world. Yeah. But also we've never had the high suicides, including in children as young as 8. We've had some, you know, relationship breakdowns, DV, kids being put into care and juvenile detention. And our solution is to build more and more prisons and more places around the globe are in conflict. You know, even now we're in conflict within Australia with just being pitted against each other. And you know, it's a judgment about who's right and who's wrong, and
instead of what's possible. Yeah.
Well, and we're on the edge of a very slippery slide here. You know, we do need to be trusting our own awareness and not just following what others are doing or saying. If it's not true for us, then perhaps there are other possibilities here. Huh? What do you reckon?
Well, you know what, I agree with everything you just said, and what you know is of concern to me is we are raising children. Parents are dissociated. The majority of parents I see around, and I would go so far as to say that it's the high 90s. They're disenfranchised, or they're dissociated, and therefore they're not able to give to their children the presence that's required. And so we're raising children by not being present with them, and that's, I can see, causing, that's why we've got such a high suicide rate in children. And you know, I'm just worried. I'm worried that there are so many kids out there that are not getting the kindness and caring that they need to thrive. And so I see a whole bunch of kids soon to turn into adults that are also not able to, you know, they've got so much trauma in their body because they didn't have the parent that was present. And I'm putting my hand up, you know, because of DV, I just disappeared. And, you know, but thankfully through, you know, just the trauma work I've done, you know, I've broken the cycle with my kids, and so they're thriving. But, you know, it's just...
But you have grace, you know, and that's, you know, like, it's not just you. Dr. Gabor Mate says he thinks it's a human condition, because that's why it's intergenerational trauma, because most young parents have been in positions where they haven't been able to be present with their kids, really present. And, you know, he goes on to say that, you know, we're the only species who's totally reliant on someone to care for us.
Touch,
yeah. And Well, our brain continues to develop after birth. So, we're there and we need that attachment. And when that doesn't happen, that's the trauma. Now, that's the trauma, which is why I didn't understand this, but I am learning about it more. And to me, it just makes so much sense. But rather than, it's really just becoming aware of it and then dealing with it ourselves.
It's not about making the people who are, dissociating, for example, because of their own trauma that's unresolved. Some of you may not even know you have trauma, that you might have thought that's just normal. And so it's not about making anyone wrong, because wrongness is judgment. It's just about saying, hey, if you're listening to this and you feel like you can't really be present with your kids, maybe there's some trauma going on for you. And what if the kindest thing you can do for you and your body is to become trauma informed and look at, potentially what trauma, whether it's, intergenerational or whether it's something you've experienced in this lifetime, and when you break that cycle, then your kids get free.
And what a beautiful legacy, hey? Most of us think about leaving money or property.
You're being sneaky now.
I know. But I just tell you, remember I've talked about our biggest project ever, our life?
Yeah.
And I do think that what if we got to the end of our life and we could feel an inner peace that we've actually broken that nexus between past trauma and future generations?
It is. You can't put a price on that. And Vicky, she's alluding to my father passed away, and he's very generously gifted money to his children. And so I rang Vic, because Vic is like my rich dad, poor dad kind of thing, because I wasn't brought up with parents that could offer certain, anyway. That's another podcast. But what I love is that just because you don't have, you haven't been brought up a certain way, you can adopt people. So I've adopted Vicky as a grandma, so and a ma and best friend and all of that. And so when this money was coming in, I said to Vic, what would you do with it? And one of the things I said to her is I want some of that money to leave a legacy. Because my dad was the most beautiful, beautiful man. And I just thought, what can I create that allows him to live on? And Vicky responded with, what did you say?
Well, about healing that trauma. You're not passing it on.
Yeah, and that was a legacy in itself. And, what if I didn't have to do an actual thing? What if me making the choice to be brave and courageous and look at my trauma and take responsibility for things that, choices I made that might not have been the best or greatest choices, and then look at what, new choices I can make. And because of that, my family's thriving. And so that, what if you can be that legacy? You can actually choose to make a difference in your life.
That doesn't just impact our own families. That's my point. I would say that this is whole world changing. And, look at the state of the world and the conflicts and everything else that's going on. Well, what we're currently doing isn't having a great deal of success. So it is time to think outside the box, in my view. Yeah. And I love what you said just in closing today. I like what you said about how about we just notice when we judge ourselves and others and stop it.
Yeah, just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. I'm going to choose possibilities here. Yeah. And as I said, I'm not talking about la land possibilities. If you're in a domestic violence relationship and you're going, okay, I'm feeling really sad about this, okay, and I'm judging it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop, and what's possible? I'm not talking about it like that. I'm saying just instead of being in judgment of you, because that is the shame, instead of being in judgment of you in that relationship, if you expand out and look at the possibilities, then you can see, oh, wow, he's going to kill me or she's going to kill me, or it's time to leave now, or no, actually this can change. No, actually I'm being triggered here and it's not what I'm thinking is not actually happening. Or, you can, from that huge vantage point of awareness, total awareness and total choice, you have the capacity to change anything. However, when you're in judgment, you've got no capacities. All you've got is the finite point of view of what your judgment is, and that's going to solicit in them a polarity response of because you make them wrong. As soon as I say I'm seeing 6, I'm making the person who sees the 9 wrong. As soon as I acknowledge what's true for me, it's not true for them. And so we've got a problem straight away instead of, having a greater perspective.
Yep, I totally agree. And probably, a last question that has sometimes, because of my age, and sometimes it's been inferred that why would I do this inner work when really it has impacts. It has had on me physically as well, I know that. And it can be very confronting. And somebody said, but if I do that, it almost makes my whole life like a charade. And they're not willing to go to where that emotional pain is. Now, I'm not making them wrong for that. It's just not my choice. I want to get to the end of my life and feel like I have done everything in my power to heal anything that may be passed on to the next generation. So I think that...
what I wanted to say with that is, how brave you are and how courageous you are, and that willingness to be vulnerable, because what you've got to get, guys, is that every single one of us has it. There's no perfect people out there. Every single one of us has made mistakes. And so what if now's the time, instead of judging you, and what I've noticed, and I agree with Dr. Gabor, when he says that the majority of disease is not hereditary, it's due to trauma. I agree with him. And so when you're willing to what we tend to do is something's happened, or we've had this experience, and then we've made it so wrong, we've made it the judgeable offense, and then we've depressed it into us, and then therefore, because it's depressed in us, we become the judgeable offense, and then we think we're not worthy enough to have anything else because within our body is this judgeable offense, and we walk around trying to hide it, but of course everything you try to hide becomes really solidified, and everyone just sees the judgment and doesn't see the beauty of you, because all you're seeing is this judgeable offense, and you think you're hiding from it, but you're not. And and it just takes that. What I've noticed with my clients and myself is that thing that you wanted to hide, that thing you thought was so ugly and wrong about you, generally speaking, is your gift and your contribution to the world. Excuse me. So, and there's nothing more beautiful than someone who's willing to be vulnerable. And, that's something my son said to me. We were talking about, parents, and he said, Mom, there's lots of things I love about you, but the one thing that really is amazing for me is that you don't say, you admit when you're wrong. You admit fault. You go, wow, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. And then you that's it. It gets dealt with. And there's no right and wrong. And he says it's the same with me. Like, I can come to you, I can make mistakes, I can present in any way I want to present, and you're going to receive me. You're not going to separate, energetically. And so, judgment is, it's just, imagine being hugged by someone who's in total judgment of themselves and or total judgment of you. What would that hug be like? Whereas if you hugged someone who just welcomed you as a beautiful being, and they're not highlighting the bad, the good, the right, the wrong, they're just saying, hi, I see you, I see all of you, and I'm not making anything you do bad or wrong. And, it's, I just see a different world. I see a different world where judgment's not there anymore.
Whoa, that's great. I want to see that too.
Vicky's going, I'm going, depressed. She goes, I see that well too. And this is, as much as it's so true what you just said though, Vic, the energy that you just brought in just then by saying that, look what got changed. And if you listen to us talking about this, you'll feel it. You'll feel where it goes depressed. You'll feel where there's joy returning. And that gift that you just did, Vic, because, we don't realize that we can bring in energies. And sometimes we do it on autopilot, and sometimes it's just who we be. But if you can actually become quite conscious of energies that you bring in, and you shifted something then. I was like, and you just went, and it just changed, right? No, but this is it. This is the ease that can happen on the most horrific things that go on in your life if you're just willing to be present with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks for being with me today, Grace. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's always super fun with you.
And do you want to finish with something?
No, I just think you're awesome, and I'm so grateful I have you in my life. And guys, if you do not have dolphins in your life, start hiring. Ask the universe to supply you with dolphins. And just because you don't, if you have a mum that's not supportive, for example, you can go adopt someone like I did. You can do it. There are people out there. You just have to ask. There is a whole new world available. Don't look at the judgment of what's wrong in your life or who didn't give you this or how terrible they were, because every single parent, I've made mistakes with my kids. My mum and dad made mistakes. It's normal. Let's get the rightness and wrongness out of it. Your mum and dad did the best that they could. You're doing the best that you can, but now we've got all this extra information, and what a gift if you are willing to look at where you are judging you and others without a point of view, without making you right or wrong. Just go, oh, that's me choosing judgment. You know what? Today I'm not going to choose that. I'm going to choose to be aware.
Love it. Great. We look to see you next week.
See you guys next week. And if there's anything you would like us to talk about, please let us know. And as we've said before, we do not, we're not experts. We're just having a chat here and saying, hey, did you know about this? And what else is possible here? And wishing you a beautiful, fun week of infinite possibilities. Okay, take care. Bye.